Don't close the door. Please. The voice was so small that Draven Morkant almost kept walking. It was 1:43 in the morning, and freezing rain swept across the deserted streets of Vespera's old courthouse district. Draven had just stepped from a private meeting inside the Halcyon Club when his security chief opened the rear door of a waiting sedan. Then he heard it again. Please, sir. Draven turned. A girl stood beneath the narrow awning of a boarded-up stationery shop. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her oversized coat reached almost to her ankles. One sleeve was torn. A faded backpack hung from one shoulder, and she clutched a small metal lunchbox against her chest as though everything she owned was inside it. Her shoes were soaked. Her lips trembled from the cold. But she wasn't crying. Two uniformed officers were speaking to her. You can't stay here, one said. I know. Then where are your parents? The girl lowered her eyes. I don't have any. Draven stopped. His security chief, Everin Say, noticed. Sir, Draven said nothing. The officer continued. There's an emergency youth center across the district. They sent me away. What? No beds. The officer sighed. Then we'll find another place. The girl looked toward the police vehicle. Fear flashed across her face. No. We're trying to help. I know. Then come with us. She stepped backward. Draven watched. Something wasn't right. Not the homelessness. The fear. She wasn't frightened of sleeping outside. She was frightened of being taken somewhere. Draven walked toward them. Everin muttered behind him, This is an extremely bad idea. Draven ignored him. The officers recognized him before he reached the awning. Their posture changed. Almost everyone in Vespera knew Draven Morkant. Publicly, he was chairman of Morkant Holdings, an enormous logistics and property empire. Privately, his surname carried another meaning. The Morkant organization had controlled part of Vespera's criminal underworld for decades. Draven had inherited it at 27. By 38, he had become the man rival bosses prefer negotiating with rather than fighting. He was feared, controlled, rich enough to make problems disappear, and absolutely unprepared for a freezing 10-year-old girl staring at him from beneath a broken awning. What happened? He asked. The first officer cleared his throat. She says she has nowhere to go. Draven looked at the girl. Name? She hesitated. Callista. Last name. Another pause. Ren. Where were you staying? She stared at the pavement. Different places. What places? A house. Booze. She shook her head. The officers exchanged glances. Draven noticed. He crouched several feet away, so he wasn't towering over her. You don't have to come near me. Callista looked at him suspiciously. Good. Draven almost smiled. Why don't you want to go with them? She clutched the lunchbox tighter. Because they'll send me back. Back where? She said nothing. Draven waited. People around him usually rushed to fill silence. Children did not. Finally, Callista whispered, to the house. What happened there? Her fingers tightened. Please don't make me go back. That was enough. Draven stood. Officer, contact child protection again. We already. Again. The man nodded. Ever moved closer. Draven. Only people who had known him for years used his first name in public. Draven looked at him. What? You cannot solve this by taking a child home. I didn't say I was. You're thinking it. Draven looked offended. I am capable of thoughts you cannot detect. Not often. Callista watched them. For the first time, the corner of her mouth moved. Draven noticed. Then the second officer returned from the vehicle. We found an emergency placement. Callista immediately backed against the wall. No. The officer raised both hands. Different location. No. Draven crouched again. Callista. She looked at him. Do you know where they're taking you? No. Neither do I. She frowned. That doesn't help. Everin turned away to hide a smile. Draven continued. What if someone checks the place first? Who? He nodded toward Everin. Callista studied him. Everin wore a dark suit and looked approximately as friendly as a courthouse statue. Him? Yes. He looks angry. I always look like this, Everin said. Callista considered that. Okay. Everin stared at Draven. Draven smiled faintly. Congratulations. You've been selected. 40 minutes later, Everin called. The emergency placement was legitimate but overcrowded. Callista could remain safely overnight while authorities investigated where she had come from. Draven expected that to be the end of it. It wasn't. By sunrise, investigators discovered that the house Callista feared was an unlicensed foster placement operating through falsified records. Several children had been moved through it. Money intended for their care had disappeared. And Callista had escaped after discovering that the woman running the house planned to send her somewhere else under another false identity. Draven made one phone call, not to intimidate anyone, to his attorney. Make certain that girl has representation. His attorney paused. What girl? Draven looked through the window of his study. The one who asked me not to close the door. What Draven did not know was that 17 years later, he would be lying unconscious inside a hospital while men who had sworn loyalty to him prepared to seize everything he controlled. His companies, his organization, his freedom, possibly his life. Every advisor around him would insist there was no way out. Except one. The homeless girl he had stopped for beneath that awning would no longer be a frightened child clutching a metal lunchbox. She would be Dr. Callista Wren. And she would become the one person in Vespera who understood that what was killing Draven Morkant wasn't what everyone believed. If you enjoy stories where one act of compassion returns in a way nobody could predict, subscribe to the channel and stay with this story. Because the night Draven gave Callista a home was only the first half of a promise neither of them knew they were making. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Draven received another call. Callista had been transferred twice. Both placements had failed. Not because she was troublesome, because she barely slept. She had food beneath her bed. She panicked whenever adults argued. And each time someone packed a suitcase near her, she assumed she was being moved again. Draven listened to the social worker. What are you asking me? Nothing. You called me. Because she keeps asking whether you know where she is. That surprised him. What? You're the first adult who told her what was happening before it happened. Draven became quiet. The social worker continued. She trusts you. That seems like poor judgment. She's 10. Exactly. Despite himself, Draven visited. Callista was sitting on the floor of a supervised residence assembling a 1,000-piece puzzle. She looked up. You came. You sound surprised. You're busy. How do you know? You have people following you. Draven glanced at Everin. Callista pointed. An angry face. Everin closed his eyes. Draven sat opposite her. I heard you've been causing trouble. Callista's eyes widened. I haven't. I know. She relaxed. He picked up a puzzle piece. Why do you keep leaving food under your bed? Her face changed. Who told you? Someone worried about you. I might need it later. There is food here. Today. One word. Draven understood more from that word than any report could have explained. Today. Food existed today. A bed existed today. Safety existed today. Callista had learned not to assume tomorrow. Draven placed the puzzle piece down. What would make you feel safe? She shrugged. A key. A key. To somewhere nobody can tell me to leave tomorrow. Draven looked at her. That evening he asked his attorney a question everyone around him considered insane. What would it take for me to become her legal guardian? Ever nearly dropped his coffee. You run a criminal organization. Draven looked at him. Thank you for remembering my occupation. Draven. I also have no convictions. That is an alarmingly technical defense. Draven knew the situation was complicated. He couldn't simply take a child because he had money. There were background assessments, court oversight, social workers, legal requirements, and questions about whether his home was appropriate. He submitted to all of them. He disclosed legitimate businesses. Security arrangements were examined. His personal life was examined. His household staff were interviewed. A judge looked at him over reading glasses and asked the question nobody else dared. Mr. Morkant, why? Draven didn't have a polished answer. So he told the truth. Because she asked for a key. The judge waited. Draven continued. She didn't ask for money, or toys, or a larger room. She asked for proof she wouldn't be thrown out. His voice lowered. I can give her that. The process took months. Eventually, with court supervision and Callista's agreement, Draven became her guardian. The first evening she arrived at Morkant House, Callista stood inside the entrance staring at the marble staircase. This is a hotel. No. How many rooms? Too many. Do you know where all of them are? Draven frowned. That question doesn't make sense. It does if you've lived somewhere with 3. He showed her upstairs. Her bedroom was larger than her previous foster home's entire living room. Callista froze in the doorway. There was a bed, desk, bookshelves, window seat, closet. Nothing extravagant for a wealthy household. But to Callista, it might as well have been a palace. She walked inside, then immediately turned. Where's the key? Draven took it from his pocket, placed it in her hand. She stared. This is mine. Yes. You have another? Yes. Emergencies. She frowned. That's cheating. I own the door. Then it's not really my key. Draven considered that. The next day, he changed the lock. Callista received both keys. Draven kept none. For emergencies, the household manager kept a seal master key under procedures Callista understood. When Draven handed her the second key, she stared at him. You changed it. Yes. Because I complained? Because you were right. Callista looked at the keys, then hugged him. Draven froze. Everin, standing 10 feet away, looked deeply entertained. Draven slowly placed one hand on the girl's shoulder. He had faced armed rivals with less uncertainty. That first year changed both of them. Callista learned that food didn't disappear if you didn't hide it. Draven learned that children ask questions during important phone calls. Callista learned to sleep through thunderstorms. Draven learned that expensive white carpets and grape juice should never occupy the same house. Callista attended school. She struggled at first. Years of instability had left gaps in her education. But she possessed an extraordinary memory, especially for science. At 12, she dismantled a broken kitchen timer because she wanted to understand why it stopped. At 13, she became obsessed with anatomy after Draven's elderly housekeeper underwent knee surgery. At 14, she announced at breakfast, I'm going to be a doctor. Draven lowered his newspaper. What? So people stop saying things like probably when somebody is sick. That seems ambitious. I hate probably. You also hate mushrooms. I'm not becoming a chef. Draven smiled. Doctor it is. He paid for excellent schooling, but he refused to buy results. When Callista received a poor chemistry grade at 15, she slammed the paper on his desk. The teacher hates me. Draven examined it. Did the teacher answer the questions incorrectly for you? No. Then study. You're supposed to support me. I support your ability to study. She glared. I like you better when I thought you were nice. I was never nice. True. She studied. Her grade improved. Their relationship became something neither expected. Not father and daughter by blood, but family nevertheless. Draven attended every important school event, usually with security waiting discreetly outside. Callista hated when he arrived late. Draven hated school auditoriums. They compromised by complaining about each other. When she graduated, Callista searched the audience. Draven sat in the third row, Everin beside him. Draven looked exactly as he did at business meetings. Serious, controlled, until Callista's name was called. Then he stood before almost anyone else. Callista saw him, and remembered an awning. Freezing rain. A man crouching several feet away because he understood she didn't want a stranger too close. After the ceremony, she handed him her diploma. For you. Draven frowned. It's yours. You paid for school. You earned it. I wouldn't have earned anything if I was still sleeping outside. Draven returned the diploma. Never confuse being given an opportunity with having your accomplishments given to you. Callista looked at him. You worked. You studied. You failed things. You tried again. That belongs to you. She smiled. You practiced that speech. Absolutely not. Everin raised his hand. He practiced. Draven glared at him. Callista laughed. Medical school took Callista away from Vespera. Draven hated it. He never admitted that. He sent security. Callista sent them back. He sent another team. She called. Stop. You live alone. So do millions of adults. You're 19. I'm legally an adult. That was clearly an administrative mistake. Eventually they compromised. One discreet security officer when necessary. No following her into lectures. No intimidating classmates. No background investigations on anyone who invited her for coffee. Draven objected strongly to the last condition. Callista won. Years passed. She became fascinated by emergency medicine and toxicology, not glamorous specialties. She liked puzzles, symptoms that contradicted each other, cases where the obvious answer was wrong. What does a toxicologist actually do? Draven asked once. Figures out what people swallowed, inhaled, touched, injected, or were exposed to. That sounds unpleasant. You run ports. Exactly. I prefer containers that don't vomit. She laughed. At 27, Dr. Callista Wren returned to Vespera. 17 years had passed since the night beneath the awning. She had changed completely. The frightened child was gone. In her place stood a composed young physician known for remaining calm when everyone around her panicked. Draven had changed too. His hair carried gray at the temples. His legitimate companies had expanded enormously, but the old organization remained a shadow behind his name. He had spent years reducing its criminal operations, shutting down the most violent parts, and moving assets into legal enterprises. That earned him enemies. Old allies accused him of weakening the family. Rivals saw opportunity. One man in particular hated what Draven was doing. Kasser Valak, Draven's longtime lieutenant. Kasser believed fear was the only language Vespera respected. For 20 years, he had stood beside Draven. He knew schedules, security, weaknesses, and he had begun secretly building loyalty among men who believed Draven had become too cautious. Callista knew almost nothing about that. Draven deliberately kept her away from the criminal side of his life. You don't get to protect me by lying, she told him one evening. They were eating dinner at Morgan House. I don't lie. You strategically omit. Different skill. Same irritation. Draven smiled. Then suddenly his fork slipped from his hand. Callista looked up. You okay? Yes. He reached for it. His hand trembled. Callista noticed. How long? Draven frowned. How long what? The tremor. I'm getting old. You're 55. Ancient. Draven. He hated when she used that tone. 2 weeks. Anything else? No. She stared. He sighed. Headaches. How often? Occasionally. Vision changes? Silence. Callista placed her fork down. Draven. Sometimes. Doctor. I have one. Name. He gave it. Callista knew the physician. Respected. She relaxed slightly. What did he say? Stress. Callista frowned. Tests. Routine blood work. Results. Normal. She wasn't satisfied. But Draven refused further interrogation. 3 weeks later, he collapsed during a board meeting. By the time Callista reached St. Orson Medical Center, the private wing was filled with security. Everin met her outside intensive care. 17 years had aged him too. He still looked angry. Tell me. Everin's voice was low. He lost consciousness. Cardiac. No. Stroke. Imaging doesn't show one. Seizure. Possible. Callista entered. Draven lay unconscious beneath white sheets. For the first time in her life, he looked small. Not weak. Human. Machines surrounded him. A physician approached. Dr. Wren. Callista nodded. What were we looking at? Neurological decline of unclear origin. Timeline. His staff reports headaches for several weeks, tremor, intermittent confusion. Callista turned. Confusion? Everin looked uncomfortable. What confusion? Misplacing things. Forgetting meetings. Once he didn't recognize a route he's taken for 20 years. Callista stared. And nobody called me? Draven ordered us not to. She closed her eyes. Of course. The physician continued. His condition worsened rapidly this morning. Labs? Mostly unremarkable. Mostly slight metabolic abnormalities, nothing explaining this. Callista examined the chart. Something bothered her. Tremor. Headaches. Visual changes. Confusion. Rapid worsening. But no obvious stroke. No clear infection. She looked at his hands. Then his nails. Then asked a strange question. Has anyone noticed stomach pain? Ever nodded slowly. Last month. Weight loss. Yes. How much? Maybe 8 kilograms. Callista's mind accelerated. Hair loss. The physician looked at her. Some. When? Recently. Callista turned. Run an expanded toxicology panel. We already ran standard tox. Not standard. She named several heavy metals and uncommon toxins. The physician frowned. You think exposure? I think we haven't explained the pattern. They ran the tests. Hours passed. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, another crisis developed. News of Draven's collapse spread. Several directors of Morkin Holdings called emergency meetings. Kasser Valek appeared at the hospital. Callista recognized him from childhood. He had brought her birthday gifts. Attended graduation. Called her little sparrow when she was 12. Callista. He embraced her briefly. How is he? Stable. Conscious? No. Kasser looked devastated. Too devastated? Callista hated herself for thinking it. Then he asked, did they determine whether his kidneys are failing? Callista went still. She had not told anyone about the kidney markers. Why would you ask that? Kasser hesitated. Someone mentioned it. Who? One of the doctors. Which doctor? I don't remember. Callista stared. Kasser smiled sadly. You're interrogating me. Occupational habit. He touched her shoulder. Your father is strong. Callista's expression softened at the word father. Draven had never demanded she call him that. She rarely did, but everyone understood what he was. Kasser walked away. Callista watched. Something cold moved through her. The expanded toxicology results returned at 3:12 a.m. The physician called her into a consultation room. You were right. Callista stared at the numbers. A toxic metal, elevated far beyond normal environmental exposure. Not enough for immediate collapse from one dose. Enough to suggest repeated exposure. Small amounts. Over time, her stomach dropped. This isn't accidental. We can't establish that medically. No. Callista looked through the glass toward Draven. But I can establish that somebody has been poisoning him. The treatment plan changed immediately. Supportive care. Specialized medication to help remove the toxin. Monitoring. Draven had a chance. But Callista understood something terrifying. If the exposure had continued another few weeks, permanent organ and neurological damage could have become much worse. Someone close enough to Draven had been repeatedly introducing poison into something he consumed. She called Everin. Who controls his food? Household staff. Drinks. Depends. Medication. Private physician and assistant. Office coffee. Executive kitchen. Anything he consumes every day that almost nobody else does? Everin thought, then stopped. Tea. Callista looked at him. What tea? An herbal mixture. Since when? Kasser started bringing it after Draven complained about headaches. Callista's face changed. How long ago? About 6 weeks. The room went silent. They searched Draven's office with law enforcement and legal counsel involved. Inside a locked cabinet near the executive kitchen, investigators found the tea. Testing revealed contamination consistent with the toxin in Draven's blood. But Kasser had disappeared. By morning, Callista understood the second half of the plan. Kasser had expected Draven's illness to look natural. Neurological disease, stress, age, possibly organ failure. Once Draven became incapacitated, Kasser intended to take control of the old organization while allied executives pressured Morkin Holdings during the leadership crisis. But Draven hadn't died, because the homeless girl he sheltered 17 years earlier had grown into the doctor who recognized what everyone else had missed. 3 days later, Draven opened his eyes. Callista was asleep in a chair beside him. He stared at her. His throat was dry. Callista. She woke instantly, then froze. You're awake. Apparently. She stood, pressed the call button, checked his pupils, asked his name, location, date. Draven frowned. I raised you. Congratulations. What year is it? He answered. Good. You're irritating. Excellent neurological sign. Doctors entered. After examinations, they confirmed his improvement. When they finally left, Draven looked at Callista. What happened? She sat down. Someone poisoned you. His expression became perfectly still. Ooh, we believe Kasser. For the first time, shock broke through. No. Callista said nothing. Draven looked toward the window. Evidence. Tea. Blood. Purchase records. Security footage. Financial transfers. Draven closed his eyes. Kasser. 20 years. A man he trusted. A man who had sat at his table. Callista understood immediately. Betrayal hurts because strangers don't know where to aim. Draven looked at her. Who taught you that? No one. She smiled faintly. I just know you. He turned away. You saved my life. The medical team saved your life. You found it. I recognized a pattern. Callista. She stopped. His voice weakened. You saved me. Her eyes filled. She looked down at her hands. You gave me a home. That was 17 years ago. I know. You owe me nothing. I know. Draven stared at her. Then she said quietly, that's why this isn't repayment. He understood. Her care wasn't a debt. His kindness 17 years earlier had not purchased loyalty. It had created family. There was a difference. Recovery took months. Draven had to relearn patience. He hated it. Physical therapy annoyed him. Medication annoyed him. Diet restrictions offended him personally. Callista supervised enough to make him miserable. You cannot run a criminal empire from a rehabilitation treadmill, she told him. I'm not running anything. Good. I am consulting. No. You cannot prescribe obedience. I can prescribe rest. Dictatorship. Walk. He walked. Everyone enjoyed every second. Kasser was eventually arrested after investigators traced financial transactions and communications linking him to the poisoning scheme and conspiracy against Draven. Draven refused to handle the betrayal through private revenge. That surprised everyone, especially Callista. Why, she asked. They sat in the garden months later. Draven walked with a cane. Because I spent my life believing power meant deciding consequences myself. And now, he looked at her. I nearly died because someone else believed the same thing. Callista smiled. Growth. Don't sound so pleased. I'm a doctor. Improvement excites me. The poisoning changed Morkant Holdings too. Draven accelerated his withdrawal from the criminal organization his family had built. It was dangerous. Complicated. Not everything could simply be closed overnight. But he began dismantling structures that depended on intimidation. He cooperated with lawyers to separate legitimate businesses from criminal networks. Some people left. Some threatened him. Others surprisingly followed. Everin remained. You're too old to start over, he told Draven. So are you. Exactly. Someone has to stop you doing stupid things. Callista opened a medical clinic in one of Vespera's poorest districts. Draven offered to buy the building. She refused. He offered equipment. She refused. He offered an ambulance. No. Why? Because you always start with one ambulance and somehow end with your name carved into a hospital. That is efficient philanthropy. That is ego. Eventually, she allowed the Morkant Foundation to contribute to a general community fund under the same rules as every other donor. Draven complained for 2 weeks, then quietly doubled his donation without attaching his name. Callista discovered it. She always did. One winter evening, exactly 18 years after their first meeting, Draven asked her to accompany him somewhere. The old courthouse district had changed. The boarded stationery shop was gone. In its place stood a youth resource center. Warm windows, counselors, emergency beds, legal support, food, showers, lockers, and a program specifically helping children moving through unstable housing. Callista stared at the building. What is this? Draven handed her a key. She looked down, then at him. No. Yes. What did you do? Nothing dramatic. Draven. The foundation purchased the building. You said no buildings with my name. It doesn't have your name. She looked toward the sign. The open door center. Callista stopped breathing for a moment. Draven continued. Temporary shelter matters. But you were right about something when you were 10. She looked at him. People also need to know where they belong tomorrow. He placed the key in her hand. Callista stared at it. 17 years vanished. She was 10 again. Wet shoes. Oversized coat. Metal lunchbox. A bedroom upstairs in an enormous house. One question. Where's the key? Her eyes filled. You remembered. Draven looked almost offended. Of course I remembered. She hugged him. This time, he didn't freeze. He wrapped both arms around her. Inside the center, every young resident received secure storage and clear information about where they would sleep and what would happen next. No one explained transfers. No mysterious adults arriving with suitcases. No promises adults couldn't guarantee. Callista insisted on that. Safety wasn't simply a locked door. It was predictability. It was dignity. It was being told the truth. Later that night, Draven and Callista stood beneath the awning outside. Snow fell softly. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Callista asked. "Which part?" "When the officer wanted me to go." Draven thought. "You asked whether someone could check the place first. You sent Everin. He still resents you calling him Angry Face. He still has angry face." "True." Callista smiled, then became serious. "Why did you stop?" Draven looked toward the street. "I heard you. Other people heard me." "Yes." "Why you?" He took a long time answering. "Because when you said, 'Don't close the door,' I remembered being 13. Callista looked at him. Draven rarely spoke about his childhood. "My father sent me away after my mother died. Boarding school, among other places." "Did you hate it?" "I hated never knowing when I would be brought back." Callista understood. The key, the certainty, the need to know tomorrow existed. "You knew." "Not exactly." Draven looked at her. "But enough." Callista leaned against the wall. "People tell our story like you rescued me." "I didn't." "You did help." "Yes. But social workers helped. Teachers, judges, doctors, scholarships, friends. You gave me stability, but you didn't magically fix everything." Draven nodded. "Good." She looked at him. "Why good?" "Because children shouldn't grow up believing rescue requires one powerful stranger." Callista smiled. That sounded suspiciously wise. "Age. Ancient. Very." They laughed. Then Draven looked through the center's windows. 17 years earlier, he believed power was the ability to make people obey. Callista taught him something different. Power could also mean giving someone enough safety to become independent of you. He had given her a room. She turned it into an education. He gave her stability. She turned it into purpose. He gave her a key. She eventually built doors for other children. And when Draven's own life began slipping away, Callista did not save him because she owed him. She saved him because 17 years had transformed a chance encounter into family. Years later, people in Vespera still told the story. The feared Mafia Boss who found a homeless girl. The girl who became a doctor. The betrayal. The poisoning. The impossible diagnosis. But Callista always corrected one detail. "He didn't make me successful." People look confused. "He gave you a home." "Yes." "He paid for school." "Yes." "Then what do you mean?" Callista would smile. "He gave me somewhere safe enough to discover what I could become." That difference mattered. Draven never chose medicine for her. Never took her exams. Never endured the sleepless nights of medical school. Never stood in emergency rooms making decisions with seconds to spare. Those accomplishments belonged to Callista, just as stopping beneath the awning belonged to Draven. One act could open a door. The person walking through still had to build a life on the other side. On Draven's 65th birthday, Callista arrived at Morkan House carrying a small wrapped box. "You hate birthdays," she said. "I do, so I bought you something." "That seems contradictory." "Open it." He removed the paper. Inside was a battered metal lunchbox. Draven stared. "You kept this?" Callista nodded. The same lunchbox she had held beneath the awning. Dented, scratched, faded. Draven opened it. Inside were two keys. One old, one new. The old key belonged to her first bedroom at Morkan House. The new one belonged to the open door center. Draven looked at her. Callista smiled. "One door you opened." She touched the second key. "One door we opened." Draven couldn't speak. Callista sat beside him. "You know what the strange part is?" "What?" "You thought you were giving me somewhere to sleep." "I was." "You had no idea what would happen." "No, I had no idea either." She looked at the keys. "That's what people misunderstand about kindness." Draven waited. "You rarely know what it becomes. Maybe nothing dramatic. Maybe the person you helped disappears from your life the next morning. Maybe they never know your name. Maybe they never repay you. Maybe 17 years pass. And maybe one day, when your own world collapses, the person who remembers that you once left a door open is standing beside your hospital bed. But repayment was never supposed to be the reason. That was the lesson Draven finally understood. He did not give Callista a home because he expected her to become a doctor. He didn't know she would. He didn't help her because he imagined she might someday save him. He couldn't have imagined it. He stopped because a frightened child asked him not to close a door. And Callista didn't fight for his life because she owed him tuition, shelter, or gratitude. She did it because he was family. The greatest things they gave each other could never be balanced on a ledger. A home, trust, time, a second chance, a life. None were debts. They were gifts. And that was why, whenever someone asked Callista which moment changed her life most, she never mentioned medical school. She didn't mention graduation. She didn't mention the night she discovered the poison. She remembered freezing rain, a broken awning, a man in an expensive coat crouching several feet away so he wouldn't frighten her, and a simple question: what would make you feel safe? Her answer had been one word: a key. 17 years later, when Draven lay unconscious and everyone around him believed his mysterious illness might kill him, Callista answered that question in a different way. This time, she became his key, not because destiny demanded repayment, but because sometimes the people we give safety to become strong enough to carry us when our own strength disappears. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about unexpected kindness, hidden betrayals, second chances, and the moments that change lives forever. Before you go, tell me your favorite moment in the comments. Was it when Draven stopped beneath the awning and refused to let 10-year-old Callista be sent somewhere unsafe without checking first? Was it when he handed her the keys to her first real room and showed her that she finally had somewhere she could call home? Or was it 17 years later, when Dr. Callista Wren looked at symptoms everyone else had missed and realized the man who once saved her was being slowly poisoned? Like the video, if you believe, giving someone an opportunity doesn't diminish what they accomplish with it. And share this story with someone who believes one act of compassion can echo much further than we ever expect. Because 17 years earlier, a feared mafia boss gave a homeless girl a key. He thought he was giving her a home. He never imagined that one day, she would become the one person holding the key to saving his life.